Hey everyone, in this video we'll crochet a top made out of granny squares, and this is the perfect project to use up any skeins of yarn that you have laying around, or if you just want to have a cute top to wear for the summer. For the top I made, I used all medium weight 4 acrylic yarn, and I used 8 different colors with white being my base color. And you'll also need a pair of scissors, a 5mm crochet hook, stitch markers, and a yarn needle. To get started, we will create the granny square. We'll start by making a slip knot. So I'm crossing my yarn over like this, so it creates a ribbon. Then I'll take the longer piece of yarn and bring it inside of that hole and then pull up to tighten. Insert your crochet hook in that hole and tighten the loop around your hook. Chain 4. Slip stitch into the first chain. Yarn over, pull through that loop, and pull through the loop on the hook. You should see a little hole created in the center, and I'll insert my finger in here so you can see it better. And we're going to work our stitches inside of that hole. To start, we will chain 3. In that center hole, we're going to work a double crochet. To double crochet, we will yarn over, insert the crochet hook inside of that hole, yarn over, pull up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. Insert another double crochet inside of that hole. Now we have a cluster of 3 double crochets. Next we will chain 2 and work another 3 double crochets inside of that hole. So we finished our second cluster of 3 double crochets, and we're going to make 2 more clusters. So we'll chain 2 and work another 3 double crochets inside of that hole, and then we'll repeat the same thing one more time. At this point, you should have a total of 4 clusters containing 3 double crochets each, and there should be little gaps in between each cluster. To finish off, we'll chain 2, and we'll slip stitch to the top of our chain 3. To find the correct chain, we can count with our yarn needle, 1, 2, and 3. I'll insert my crochet hook into that stitch. yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through the loop on your hook. We finished our first round, and we can use the tail in the back to close the hole in the center. To change colors, we're going to first fasten off, so chain 1, grab your scissors and snip off the yarn, leaving a small tail behind. Pull that yarn through and tighten. So I mentioned in between each cluster we have these little gaps, and we're going to attach our next color inside of that space. To make the edges of the granny square very clean, I'm going to turn my work over after every round before attaching my color. And this is optional, but I find that it helps keep it all really neat. So I'm taking my yellow yarn as my next color, and we're going to create a slip knot. Grab your crochet hook and insert it into any corner space. So I'm inserting mine right here. And take that slip knot and loop it onto your hook and tighten the yarn around it. We'll pull it through so that it's on the other side. And what I like to do is take this little tail of yarn and wrap it over my hook like this, just so it's more secure. And we can chain 3. And you can move it in the back so that it's out of the way now. After you chain 3, we're going to insert 2 double crochets inside of that space. Yarn over and insert a double crochet in that same space that our chain 3 is coming out of. So I have 2 double crochets and my chain 3 counts as one of them, and I'll insert 1 more double crochet inside of that space. Chain 1, and we're going to skip over these 3 stitches in the middle and jump right to our next space. In this second space, we'll first work 3 double crochets, and after we make that cluster of 3, we're going to chain 2 and insert 3 more double crochets inside of that same space. And what this will do is create a corner for our square. After finishing each corner, chain 1, and in our next corner we'll repeat the same thing. So work 3 double crochets, chain 2, followed by 3 more double crochets. Chain 1, and repeat the same thing in this third corner. chain 1, and in our very first corner where we started with 3 double crochets, we're going to work 3 more double crochets back in that same space, and this will finish off our corner. At the end, we will chain 2 and slip stitch to the top of our chain 3. So 1, 2, and 3. Round 2 is complete, and to begin round 3, we will cut off our yarn and change colors. Like we did after round 1, I'll turn my square over and find a space to attach the new yarn. Make a slip knot, loop it onto your hook, tighten the yarn, and pull through that space. Take the tail of yarn, wrap it over your hook, and chain 3. Place 2 double crochets in the first space. Chain 1. To work the middle spaces, we're going to be doing something a little different. So first I'll place 1 double crochet in that middle space. And to make my square have less holes, I'm going to work a double crochet in the stitch directly below in that blue cluster. So you can see in that cluster we have 3 stitches, and in that center double crochet stitch, I'm going to insert my double crochet directly inside that stitch. And this will help to make our holes less big on our granny square. To demonstrate, I'll yarn over, insert my crochet hook into that center stitch. We'll yarn over and pull up a loop from the outside, and we want to bring that loop up to the same height as our stitches. So I'm going to move my crochet hook up so it creates this very long stitch. Then we'll yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. And we'll do 1 more double crochet inside of that space. But instead of working in the blue now, we're just going to work back in the regular space. So I'm pushing my stitches to the right here, and you can see that there's still a space, so I'll yarn over and work a double crochet in that space. So for the 3rd stitch, we're not working in the bottom, we're just working in the regular space. And I prefer making the granny square this way because it covers more of that gap in the center. And remember, we're only going to do that in the middle spaces. Next, we'll chain 1. In the corner space, we'll work 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and 3 more double crochets in that space. Chain 1, and we're back at another middle space. So we'll do another 3 double crochets, but our 2nd stitch, remember, will go directly in that center stitch of our bottom cluster. To demonstrate again, we'll yarn over and work 1 double crochet in that space, and our second double crochet will insert directly below in that second stitch. And then we'll yarn over and pull the loop from the outside to the inside and pull that loop up to the height of a double crochet. We'll yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And for the third double crochet, we'll work back in that space. Chain 1, and in our corner spaces we'll work the same pattern of 3 double crochets, chain 2, followed by 3 more double crochets. Chain 1 and repeat the same pattern until the end of the round. So I finished up that last middle cluster and I'm going to chain 1, and in that first space where we have 3 double crochets, going to finish by inserting 3 more double crochets. Chain 2 and slip stitch to the top of our chain 3. And you can ignore all the loose strands for now. We're going to handle them at the end of the granny square. I'm attaching my 4th color, chain 3, and then place 2 double crochets inside the first space. Chain 1, and we'll repeat the same technique in the middle spaces that we did the last round. And the more rounds that you do on your granny square, the more spaces that you'll have in the middle. So I'm going to work a regular double crochet in that first space. Then I'm going to work into that middle stitch on the bottom cluster. So we'll work our double crochet into that middle stitch. And for the third double crochet, we'll work back inside of that space. Then we'll chain 1 and repeat the same thing in the next middle space. Chain 1, and in our corner space we'll work a cluster of 3 double crochets, a chain 2 in between, and a cluster of 3 double crochets back into that corner. Chain 1 and repeat the same steps for the other sides of the granny square. And when you're at the end, we can chain 2 and slip stitch to the top stitch in our chain 3. Chain 1 and fasten off. For the final round of my granny square, I'm using white for the outer border. So I'm attaching my white yarn in that corner space and chaining 3 and working 2 double crochets inside of that first space. Chain 1, and for this last round I have 3 middle spaces to work into, so I'm going to repeat the same pattern that we've been following in the previous rounds. So we'll start with a double crochet in the first middle space and a double crochet into the stitch below in that orange cluster. And the third double crochet will just go back in that space. Chain 1, and we'll repeat this all the way around. So for every middle space, we'll keep doing what we've been doing, and for each corner space, we'll work a cluster of 3 double crochets, chain 2 followed by another cluster of 3 double crochets, and when you get to the end, we'll chain 2 and slip stitch to the top of our chain 3 that we started with, and then we can chain 1 and fasten off. And you can continue to add as many rounds as you'd like, depending on how big or small you want your granny square to be. When you finish the granny square, you can tuck in all the loose strands on the side that you want to be the inside. So I'm pulling them all in, and then I'll work on weaving them in with my yarn needle. To do this, you can work underneath a few loops with the respective color, and because there's so many loose ends on every granny square, I don't bother hiding all of them into the work. You can also use scissors to just snip off each of the loose ends as well. I finished my first granny square, and you can make as many as you want using different color combinations. And now we'll move on to sewing each of the squares together. To construct the top, I made a total of 11 squares in the front and back, and 3 on each side. And the side squares will be used to add more width to the top so that when you're wearing it, it's more comfortable in the armhole area. There's a ton of different methods for sewing granny squares, but in this video I'll show you how to do the matcher stitch, which I find to be the cleanest way for joining the squares. We'll start by taking 2 granny squares and placing them vertically. With my yarn needle, I've attached some white yarn, just enough to sew these two squares together. And on the top square, I'm inserting in this corner loop underneath the back loop and coming out in the back loop above it. And I'll pull my yarn through until I have a little bit of yarn remaining. So I'm leaving this much. And now we can pick up the bottom square, and in the corner I'm going to go under this back loop and then out on top of the back loop right above it. So what I'm doing is picking up one back loop and going through the back loop that's right above it and then pulling through. And you don't want to pull super tight. You'll want to keep it a little loose because we're going to pull it all together at the end. So now I'm going back into the top square and I'm going underneath this back loop, and right above it I'm going through the back loop and pulling my yarn needle through. And once again, I'm leaving the yarn a little loose. And each time that I pick up the back loop, I'm working into the loop that we just sewed together. So you see how that piece of yarn is coming out of it? We're going to work right back into that back loop and work through the back loop right above it. Pull through. And we'll repeat this weaving technique until we've sewn the squares together. So we'll alternate between the top and bottom squares. So here's the two back loops on the top square. And back on the bottom square. And going into this back loop. And then out through the loop on top of it. If this part is confusing, then you can also work a whip stitch to join the squares, or you can weave in and out of the front or back loops. I've turned it sideways and just working the same weaving technique. Hopefully this angle is a little better to see the stitches. When you reach the top of the squares, you can go through the back loops on both sides. To tighten the stitches, we're going to pull the strands on both ends. And be sure that you don't pull too tight or else the yarn will rip off. And this method of joining the squares creates an invisible seam. To connect the other squares together, you can take your yarn needle and insert it into the corner back loops of the new square, and I'm going to connect it to this bottom square, and this should connect each of the corners. And we'll just repeat the same process to connect the remaining squares. And every time you add a new square, we'll use the same yarn to tighten. And you can add more yarn as you go if you start to run out when you're sewing the squares together. To tie off or secure your yarn after doing the mattress stitch, we can work our yarn needle through a few stitches, and this can be in any direction, so I'm just working downwards to hide the yarn. Then I'm going back up and turning it sideways and working through a few stitches on the other square. And finally, I'm just going to secure a knot here and cut off the yarn. After sewing the body panels together, I'm working on the tops of the shoulders. Then you'll just repeat the same thing on the other side. And for all the loose ends, I'm going to trim each one instead of weaving them in because it does take a long time and they're quite short, which makes it a little harder to sew. When you're finished sewing the tops of the panels together, we can attach the side squares. So I'm taking more yarn and threading it through my needle and sewing along the sides. So I finished attaching one side square and working my way down to attach the second and third one. And after attaching them all vertically, I'm just going to sew the middle sections. And then we can turn it over and sew it along the back panel. For the last part, we'll add a ribbing or border around the neckline. So I'm first going to create a slip knot, and I'll take my crochet hook and insert it into the corner stitch along the neckline, loop that onto my hook, pull it through, and chain 3. I'm going to double crochet in each stitch along the neckline. And wherever there's a gap or opening, you'll just insert a double crochet inside of that space. And then we can slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 when we make it all the way around. Then chain 1 and fasten off. For the armholes, I'm going to work a single crochet along the border instead of double crochets because I didn't want it to be too thick. So I just created a slip knot and I'm inserting my crochet hook into this corner stitch right here, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2. To decrease the size of this armhole, I'm working a single crochet in every other stitch. If you are satisfied with the size of the armhole, then you can just work a single crochet in every stitch instead of skipping each one. And this will just clean up the edges around our top. At the end of the round, slip stitch into the first single crochet and fasten off. And repeat the same steps to add a border for the other armhole. Finally, we can add a ribbing along the bottom of the top. So take your crochet hook and create a slip knot, and then pull that through. And for the bottom, I'm just going to work single crochets. So I'll chain 1 and single crochet in each stitch all the way around. Slip stitch into the first single crochet at the end of the round and chain 1 and fasten off. I really love the way this came out. It's very cute and colorful, and it was a lot of fun to make. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe below. And as always, thanks so much for watching.